We want to invite Gregory Simpkins, who is my old friend. Greg is a senior advisor for the Office of Sustainable Development at USAID. Greg and I go back about 30 years. I've seen him at Corporate Council in Africa, 25 years. And we traveled to Africa and monitored elections. And he's one of the most balanced people I know. He's one of the smart guys in the city. And we really tried to fill the room up with smart people. We went out of our way to individually invite people. How many people call Mel, I want to come to this? Sorry, you know. So we got a smart audience. We thought the time was smart, and so we wanted to have a smart guy to come up and share what's going on with USAID and how we get your money.
Before I start, I want to tell you something. I'm sorry the Congresswoman had to leave. Part of the reason I'm where I am now is because of her. There was a hearing we had, and she came up to the chairman and I, and she said, you know, Greg, you should go into this administration. And I said, oh, I hadn't really thought about it, but okay. So I ended up there, and as I have a lot of experience working with her on the subcommittee, I don't think it'd be much problem for us to continue doing that. I've been taking our folks to meet with her since early this year. Regardless of what happened in the election, I told them that's somebody we need to work with. So we will get that done. Thank you, Mel and Janine, for having me. Thanks to Dean Briggedy and Jennifer and Ambassador Mula for having me back at my alma mater, GW. Always glad to be here. If you read the newspapers, you listen to the electronic media, you would think that the administration has no Africa policy. That's not really true. We're working every day. I've been working since I got there in January on the Trade with Africa portfolio. And we have a new initiative that we're working on. I can't announce it all yet, but let me say I think you'll like it. It is private sector led in that we will work with U.S. businesses and African businesses and go where people want to go. And much of what we're going to do is going to be with the diaspora. Small business is what creates jobs, and we need to match like size with like size. So the conference that Malcolm mentioned is one that we've organized with the African Union. We expect that it's going to be the start of a very exciting initiative. So I wish I could tell you more about it, but we should hear about it in the next few weeks. Now, rule of law and good governance are concepts that have significant meaning to trade. Nobody wants to invest anywhere where you can't get treated well in the courts, where your company could be seized and nationalized, where the whole banking system is skewed against you. Our government may not be perfect, but we do try to leave our foreign partners better than we found them. That's why USAID works on enhancing enabling environments with cooperating African governments, and there are some, and private sectors and civil societies. We find that it's mutually beneficial. When you help African governments achieve their goals of economic development, it makes them better partners. It makes them more stable, and they're able to work with us and others to address the challenges of international crime, trafficking, pandemics, and natural disasters, and stand on their own. Our theme at USAID is the journey to self-reliance. Nobody is self-sufficient, not even us. But you can be self-reliant in that you can have a government that has a GDP strong enough that you can meet the basic needs of your own people. Now, African citizens have shown in polls that they like the way we do business with Africa because we're there in emergencies, we do transfer technology, and we do technical assistance. I know that a lot of people think that, well, why are we always criticizing China? China can be in Africa, nobody's saying they can't be, and people can do business with China, but you have to be careful with not just China, but anybody. You have situations now where the lending that China is making based on natural resources is coming to bite governments in Africa. In Zambia, for example, Because they can't keep up with the payments to China, they've lost control of the national radio network, they've lost control of the electric facility, and by now they've probably lost control of the port. There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with how that goes. We've been working with a group of African researchers who want to develop a program in consultation with think tanks on the continent to devise ways to advise governments on how to protect their natural resources from predatory investors. And again, it isn't just China, there are others as well. But this corrosive capitalism, or rather corrosive lending that they have, it eliminates the regulations that the governments themselves have put in place to protect their citizens. You can't have that. That's not good for the country. It's not good for the citizens. Not good for investors. So it isn't just that we want to protect our own interests. Of course we do. Anybody would. But it's more than that. Now, you've heard about the International Development Finance Corporation that was created as the result of the BUILD Act. It was said that it was developed to compete with the Chinese, sort of. It's also meant to increase what we can do on the continent in terms of risk insurance, lending, equity. So the new IFDC will allow for a 21st century free market approach to development finance. It will raise the contingent liability cap to $60 billion over 5 years. It permits minority equity investments of up to 30% of total equity in any given product. It provides technical assistance and grants for advisory services, and it allows products to be denominated and repayable in foreign currency, which is often a big problem. Excuse me. From the Brookings Institution to the Heritage Foundation to the Atlantic Council, think tanks have examined Africa's importance globally, and they agree that Africa is far too important to ignore or underestimate. The African middle class is estimated at 350 million people out of a total population of nearly 1 billion. And they are increasingly willing and able to purchase American and other foreign goods. The total African buying power, according to the Harvard Business Review, will be approximately $1.1 trillion by 2020. Meanwhile, African producers can see a U.S. consumer market of 345 million people that already has a purchasing power of more than $11 trillion, the largest in the world. I've worked on Africa since, AGOA since it started. I've worked on Africa about 40 years, but AGOA since it started as legislation in Congress in the mid-90s. And we have a little more than 6 years left. The duty-free, quota-free treatment that we offer under AGOA is a tremendous benefit to African producers. And we wish that more would take advantage of it. There's 6,400 items that you can have exported into this country, quota-free, duty-free. African producers are taking advantage of only a small part of that. We at USAID are reorganizing our way of doing business. As a matter of fact, I'm going over to the 3 international trade hubs in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa after Thanksgiving. And we're talking about creating a pipeline that would inform business people here of opportunities in Africa and connect African and American businesses in a meaningful, effective way. And many of those businesses are going to be diaspora businesses. You see, we were never a colonial power. So unlike the British or the French, we don't have our nationals all over the country in remote corners who can tell you, don't do business with them, do business with these people. We need our diaspora, both the native-born like myself and the African-born who live here, to work with us and be that spear, that vanguard going into Africa to find out the best opportunities for both sides. We feel that if it's mutually beneficial, it's sustainable. If it's only in the interest of one party, it's not going to last because people will see that it's unfair and they won't want to do it. So I think that one of the things that we really need to do is increase the education on AGOA. As I said, I've been working on it since the mid 1990s with Mel and Janine and other people. The problem is too many people in America and Africa still don't know what AGOA is. We had a civil society forum back in early July, and a lady got up and she said, well, why doesn't AGOA build this factory or do this? I said, wait a minute. AGOA is a trade process. It's not an organization. It's not a funder. It gives people an opportunity to make money. What we have not done as well is make sure that our businesses are trading with Africa. We've done it as a development program, which, to be honest with you, that's how we sold it to the Senate years ago. And that's fine, because it is in a way, but it's supposed to be mutually beneficial. If for no other reason, then when you send ships back and forth, they have to be full going and full coming. Otherwise, you're paying for that unused space. It makes it not feasible economically. So we want to make sure that we galvanize those businesses here who want to sell to Africa or who want to buy from Africa, and the same on the other side. And this is why we applaud the creation of the African Diaspora Business Roundtable, because we think that there are many of these organizations who have hundreds of members who want to do business in Africa. They just need somebody to point them in the right direction. And that's what we intend to do. So I think that I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, I'd be glad to. Sure. Well, one I can answer that was from the other speaker, and that was, you asked Ambassador Mulamula about Electrify Africa. It has been combined with Power Africa. So now Power Africa has a much larger spread than it did before, because it can operate in many different venues and in many different ways.
When I was in Congress, we worked with USAID on involving the HBCUs in the work in Africa. And where is that, and where do you see that fitting in?
We are reforming the office that does hospitals and universities, and I have to see where that ends up, how that ends up, but we need all the research we can get, and universities like Howard and Tuskegee have been doing this for a long time and have been involved in very successful projects, so we need to keep them involved. So I think you can count on that being continued. And by the way, we miss you.
I'm still around.
Okay. Yes.
Talking about over-indebtedness due to Chinese lending, when a country gets overly in debt, they go to the IMF. Now, the IMF can take care of their debts, but they're using U.S. taxpayer money. Should U.S. taxpayer be bailing out countries that are in debt to China?
You know, there was a letter written by several members of Congress a few months ago, which urged the IMF not to do that, because it's not like they haven't been cautioned on what they're doing. And in some cases, there's deceit by some of these governments. Mozambique, for example, had $2 billion in debt that they hid from their own citizens. And I'm sure that the Zambian government never explained how that whole deal was put together. I would say that the IMF would be very disinclined to do that, because, folks go out, get this debt, you absolve them from debt, they get back into debt again. You can't keep going through that. You have to do the right thing. You have to do the smart thing for your own people, not just for international trade, for your own people. So I think that if they do anything at all, the IMF, it will have a lot of clauses in it that would prevent you from making the same mistake again.
Greg, the African Union has determined that they're going to build a unified trading relationship with the continent. It sounded to me on the surface something that's long overdue, long needed. Do you think the U.S. government is going to support that short term? Is it something that we should be embracing? What is your thought on that?
Well, we've had a lot of discussions. USTR and State Department and USAID, both state and USAID have representation at the AU. And we work very closely with the AU. The conference we have Thursday and Friday is just the latest example of what we do together. So yes, I think we will be able to work with them. We work with the regional economic communities, which are the building block for the Continental Free Trade Area. So I am very hopeful that we will have a continued good relationship with them in building what they've been working on for a long time. This is not new. This is something that the AU has been building methodically over the years, and they're ready to unveil something that is truly historic and truly significant. So yes, we would very much be in favor of it.